What's up, everyone? We are on the verge of the end of the 2022 wrestling card year, which should end with Immaculate that is being released on February 22nd. We are on the verge of starting 2023, which, if I had to guess, is going to have Prizm as the leadoff once again. Last year's Prizm set was a landmark product with record-setting prices, a huge amount of attention, some great-looking cards, and I have a ton of excitement about what we could see for 2023. And now that we have seen what the design could possibly look like, which I'll cover here in a few minutes, I wanted to get a video out there that walks through some of the things that I'm most excited about for Prizm 2023 and how you can plan to engage with the product as we sort of get going here. So without further ado, let me start to break it down and we'll go section by section. Let's take a look at the design, which, if history proves correct, is modeled after the football set. We just got our first look at 2022 Prizm Football, which usually comes out a little bit earlier than this, but I guess with some delays, they've pushed it back. The design is usually what funds kind of the UFC design, the WWE design, the NASCAR design, like it all sort of like aligns together. And so we can sort of take a look at what football is bringing to the table, and we will have an opportunity to better understand what WWE is going to look like. Last year's set design was, I think, middle of the road. Like, it wasn't tremendous, but it wasn't bad either. And I think it really worked for a lot of the ways that they were going to use it for WWE. With this design, I think it's much, much better. And I'm interested to see if they really just sort of copy and paste it, or if there are some adjustments that are going to be made. We have every reason to believe that there's going to be horizontal cards as well. We haven't seen the design as much for that, but it is something that I think when you look at the design, you see that there are pretty intact borders, really good sort of places to incorporate color, large space for the photos. I think this is going to be a really good looking set. I think we're going to have a ton more parallels. I think we're going to have a ton more things to look at here. We may get some of the select fun of the animal prints and some other things like that. But this base design is what is going to drive sort of the entirety of that main set, which everybody collects. The previews for football, we did see what the gold looks like. So it did have a really interesting sort of look. It's more black focused. The accompaniments on the design are black instead of red like they were last year. I think the red last year only worked for some of the colors. If because this is more black focused in the accompaniments and the embellishments here, like we're gonna have a much more sort of cohesive look for all the different parallels, and I think it'll fit in much better than some of the like sort of pinched sort of designs that we're seeing with last year's. I think the horizontal cards for 2022 were incorporated into the design much better. But for this, I think this is going to do a much better job for the virtual cards because it's square. It has a much more clear approach for how a trading card would look as opposed to sort of the hourglass shape that was on last year's card. So I'm really excited about this design. I think it sort of mirrors the legacy of what Prizm sort of has brought since 2015. So if you go back before 2015, the cards design tends to be all over the place. But once you hit 2015, it usually just does take on sort of the border chrome-like sort of approach, which is, you know, the photo in the middle with the thick borders to incorporate the parallel colors. So I think that that's what we're going to see here. I think this is a really good example. I'm excited to see the preview for wrestling when it eventually comes out, probably in a month or two here. Let's talk about the base parallels because I think this is really one of the things that defines Prizm as a set. Like for a long time, you know, Topps has released things like Chrome or Finest or whatever that have had a ton of parallels. Those parallels are usually 7 to 10 in that range. Prizm last year was like 20 to 25. And so this year, I don't think that's going to go down. I think that's probably going to stay the same or go up. And I think that's probably what most of us need and expect to happen. Um, like some of the best ones last year were like the white sparkles and the pulsars, which weren't even part of the main pack pulled set. Like pulsars were retail, they're out of 25. Then you had the white sparkles that was on their own set. You had scopes that were part of the premium box set. So like a lot of parallels weren't even part of the main hobby product. We also didn't get any animal prints. Most of the base stock was flat color. So you had, red waves and you had cracked ice and you had all these things, but they weren't numbered. Like the numbered parallels, the red, blues, and golds and stuff, those are just flat colors. And if you look at basketball and football, a lot of those sets feature stock patterns that have waves or circles or some crazy sort of experience that a collector holding those cards in their hand would have a much better experience than just a flat color. So as we get into the next generation of Prizm, is that going to be something where they're incorporating some more of those fun things into like the base hobby product? We also didn't get any nebulas. We didn't get any of the animal prints, like I mentioned with Select. Like those things happen to be in Prizm as much as they are in Select in all the other sports. I didn't see as much of that in UFC, but like stuff like that could be a factor as we get into the next year of Prizm. There are things that happened in WWE that didn't happen in UFC, and I think that's really a key element to sort of handicapping how the base set is going to play out. So, as we sort of get more of a preview and as we get more understanding, like, are they going to go back to a large bulk parallel set that has no numbering, like the cracked ice or the waves or whatever, and then sort of do they change the structure as it gets rarer and rarer across the entirety of the set? Those things for Prizm are key elements to the success of things. And last year, like we saw the black Prizm sell for insane amounts of money. We saw the gold sell for huge amounts of money and then sort of come down. Now there are desirable people that still have really high prices on the golds. Like I think as you add to that set and as people have their first gold Prizms or have their first availability in the set, whether that be Cody Rhodes or Roxanne Perez or whoever, like those are the types of people that I think will drive a lot of the value in the secondary market. Now, people who have had Prizm cards before, like The Rock or my collection and Becky Lynch, other things like maybe that's where we see some drop offs significantly because they're no longer their debuts. Really curious to see how that performs, especially as we get into some of the players that at the top of the card, right? Those superstars that are really either making their debut at the top of the card for the first time in a new gimmick or in something like that. Like those are the types of cards I want to see, or the lower end parallels and see how those perform compared to last year, because I think that's where the major fall off happened was like as people were getting into these like unnumbered bulk parallels, like those really took a dive. So now that you don't have the rookie class as well, so you don't have the Braun Breakers and stuff like that, will the lower parallels of some of the newer rookies perform the way that they did, especially if the stock patterns change and stuff like that? So I'm really interested to see how this all plays out, but I wanted to cover the parallels specifically because I think we're going to get some new ones. I think we're going to get some new fun stuff. Panini rarely goes backwards. They always go up, 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 up. So let's see how this plays out. There are going to be a lot of debuts in Prizm this year. Key debuts. There probably won't be as large of a checklist as well, and there's a number of reasons for that. So for this section, I want to cover some of the main debuts that are going to happen with Prizm and some of the ones that will generate the most value on the secondary market. Let's start with a guy who I expect to be the cover featured athlete, and that is Cody Rhodes. Since coming back to WWE and WrestleMania last year, right before Prizm released, um, he has set the world on fire on television. He was also injured for a considerable period of time. He saw his Panini debut in Select last year, and those cards sold very, very well, especially in the parallels because there was only one card available. It was only the ringside. As we got into sets like Impeccable and Immaculate and stuff like that, Cody Rhodes has had a little bit of a larger um, potential increase in number of cards. Chronicles, he had a ton of stuff, and including his first autographs. So as we get into Prizm now, this is his Prizm debut, but it's not his autograph debut. It's not his Panini debut, but collectors love first Prizms historically in other sports. So even though he's had cards and autographs in other sets, it's still a big deal in most of the cases that Cody Rhodes comes to WWE and gets his first Prizm card. Whether or not that translates the way that it did in other sports, I think is the one piece of this that is yet to be seen. I would guess yes. I would guess there's a lot of people out there that want a gold Cody Rhodes. I'm guessing there's going to be a lot of people out there that want the black Cody Rhodes. I bet those will be huge cards. His autographs and stuff like that, those will be big cards, especially if he has dual autographs with people like Seth Rollins, like he does in Immaculate, like how that autograph content translates across coming out of something like WrestleMania. I don't know if this is going to be released before WrestleMania. I hope it is. But like, there's a potential here that Cody Rhodes comes out of WrestleMania the champion, and Prizm is released a couple of weeks later or a couple of weeks before. I'm curious how the values impact there. There's also big debuts for, like I said, in the autograph side for Roxanne Perez, Nikita Lyons, Sol Ruca. Like, all of these people have not had Prizm cards before. Sol Ruca hasn't had any cards before, and I apologize if I'm saying her name wrong, but her work in NXT has been awesome. Like, her finisher, I had to watch like 3 or 4 times because that thing was just so hard to sort of like see how she did it. Like, she's been making waves as a new NXT superstar. She'll have cards likely in this. Roxanne Perez, Nikita Lyons from the women's side. From a male side, you're looking at Bray Wyatt, which I hope they bring some of the cool war paint photos that he had from that ridiculous pitch black match at Royal Rumble. But, Bray Wyatt will be in this. I would guess people like Braun Strowman, who historically maybe were mid-range, low-range sort of values. Hopefully we get Macho Man, Ric Flair, some of the people that were missed. Maybe we get Vince McMahon. But some of those cards that I think were purposefully left out of the previous year's Prizm will hopefully be making debuts. Macho Man is probably the biggest name that I think will be an absolute shoo-in to be included in this checklist. He was included in Select. He was included in some of the other sets. So I assume he's coming for this. Ric Flair's a wild card. I think we've seen him on WWE TV for the first time recently. Now that they've settled that lawsuit with him and Becky Lynch, like, the controversy over Dark Side of the Ring may have subsided a little bit. So maybe we get Ric Flair in this set. Maybe we get some Ric Flair autographs too. But I think that's a big name to add to this. And then you have people like Ronda Rousey, who, have a huge name in sports, have a huge name in the history of combat sports specifically. But, maybe this run in WWE hasn't been her best, but she still has that pedigree coming into the product that would want people to collect her first Prizm cards. The last names I want to mention are probably the most important names to be included on this checklist of debuts because I don't think they're going to have autographs. One of them is Pat McAfee. The other two are Logan Paul and Bad Bunny. Pat McAfee has a humongous following in the sports world because of his podcast and because of his personality and his involvement in College Game Day and other places. Pat McAfee's going to have cards in Immaculate. That means he can be likely on the Prizm checklist. That would be absolutely gigantic. Logan Paul and Bad Bunny in similar celebrity sort of capacities. Like, Logan Paul, I think, is a little bit of a 50-50 name. I think Bad Bunny's even less than that. But both of them are incredibly visible, popular people. As we saw in the Super Bowl kickoff show, Logan Paul is putting out a Prime energy drink. That Prime drink had SummerSlam highlights in the commercial. So, like, he is identifying with his WWE personality. He's shown everybody how awesome he is in the ring. So I think having Logan Paul cards, despite his totally negative view in the greater sort of social media landscape, would be cool to have him in a WWE set. Bad Bunny is one of the largest celebrity performers on the planet, and his participation in previous WWE events makes him eligible to be negotiated with. I hope they get him into this set too. Huge Hispanic focus for getting more people involved in wrestling and getting more people of Latinx sort of heritage into wrestling as well. His cards could have a big impact that way as a result. And he's just a giant celebrity. Like, everybody, saw that he was probably the number one most downloaded artist on Spotify. Like, this guy has a ton of potential, but I don't think any of those guys will have autographs. Panini does have some Pat McAfee stickers out there, I would guess. So maybe we get lucky, but that's another element to this. There are a lot of other debuts I'm sure I'm missing, but those are the ones that I'm the most focused on. So traditionally, Prism autograph content is not the focus of the product. In basketball and football and even in UFC and other places, like the autograph content doesn't drive what is truly valuable in the product. In WWE, for the first time, I think there was a lot of focus on the autograph content, and that's probably a reflection of the collectors taking that from the existing WWE product lines that Topps has had and other companies have had, and bringing that affinity for autograph content to Prism, which again was never a major thing for basketball. For basketball and football, it was always the golds, it was always the low number parallels, it was the base cards and the base parallels, the rookies specifically. Like those are the things that usually drive Prism's value in almost every iteration that's ever been released. WWE doesn't look like that's going to be the case. Now, if we there's two elements to this that are big question marks. One, are they going to bring back more autograph content than they had before, knowing that this is the case? And two, will those autographs be hard signed? And I think we have to look at NASCAR as sort of like the exception to the rule because all the NASCAR Prism cards are signed on card. So there's a potential that it could happen. I don't think it will, but that would be incredibly awesome if it does. I think if you bring on card autographs to Prism next year, like things will go absolutely insane. But that being said, there are some major people that I think will have their autograph debuts in this set that will drive insane amounts of value. We don't have an autograph yet for Nikita Lyons. We don't have an autograph yet for Roxanne Perez. We don't have an autograph yet for some of those guys that came along but weren't ever included in an autograph set. I think that was probably done on purpose so that those debuts can happen in a product like this. Roxanne Perez was in select. Nikita Lyons was in select. Like she should have had autographs in Immaculate. She should have had autographs in those areas. They haven't yet. We also don't have Ronda Rousey in any of the autographs. We don't have, any of those guys even have base cards yet. So I'm curious, like, will the autograph content for those people be enough to drive up a box price? Not, I hope not to the levels that we saw coming into 2022, but it could contribute a lot to 2023, especially with Cody Rhodes, Bray Wyatt, like all those people that are coming back to WWE have had autographs and products before, but this will be their first in Panini sets, and it will be a debut for them. In Cody Rhodes' case, is going to drive a lot of the speculation here on this product. So, from an autograph contents perspective, I think we're in a really good spot. I'm looking forward to seeing kind of where the checklist goes, and if they're maybe going to bring in some people for 2023 that we've been waiting a lot of time for. It's people like Sable, people who haven't signed for WWE in a really long time, Ric Flair, all those guys. So maybe this is a different year and a different product, but more importantly, maybe there's a larger focus on autograph content, knowing that WWE collectors showed in the previous iteration that it was a really key element of how they valued the secondary pieces of these sets being more valuable than they are in other sports. The last thing I want to focus on is the wax specifically and the price that we're expecting. Last year's Prism Wax came in way overheated. And I was really excited to see that because it meant WWE was going to be on a stage that it had never been on before. And it still is for a lot of reasons. You still see major social media accounts posting wrestling related cards and stuff like that. The wax started exceptionally high because there was a lot of speculations. A Prism debut, the hobby was still white hot. Since then, the hobby has gone like this, and Prism wax as a specific indicator of that has gone even further down. Like historically, um, Prism has sort of followed the hobby almost intrinsically. Like the way the hobby performs is the way that Prism performs, because Prism is a standard element of the investing culture that's sort of taken over the hobby since 2019 and relatively before. But more importantly, with the COVID boom and everything else that happened in trading cards, people really honed in on Prism as a investor level product. And for me, as somebody who has covered WWE and been involved with WWE cards since 2017, seeing them explode like that was really cool to see. I think we saw a really big backlash that people could not understand how a niche area of the hobby was going to perform at a box that cost $1,200 for a flagship type product. It relayed in the singles as well. The singles dropped, everything dropped. At the same time, you saw the hobby continually hit those nosedive patterns that we've seen. Some aspects of the hobby have recovered a little bit, but we're still at 60 to 55 to 60% in some cases of where they were at peak levels. So that all started really around the beginning of Prizm 2022. So those niche areas that didn't have the built-in sort of audience that an NFL or an NBA did, those went first. And that was kind of what I had been saying since the beginning. This year, I think a lot of people have learned their lesson. I think a lot of the initial sort of hype beast investors have left for other pastures because they've started to recognize that a lot of their other investments are probably tanking as much as their WWE ones did originally. So I don't think we're going to see a lot of the same speculation. But we did see immaculate boxes start to creep up. We've seen other prices start to creep up. So if this does have an initial sort of offering at 225 or where Prizm is right now from 2022, I think we could see it start to creep up a little bit just because it's Prizm and people love the new card here. And I think it may actually be driven more by the wrestling collectors this time around than the investors because there's going to be a lot of people who will want the Cody Rhodes, who will want some of the debuts, but the product looks better. The base design, if that's the one they use, it looks better. I think we have a lot more history. I think we have a lot more sort of information available. We know how things are going to perform. So if they started at like a 225, I'm really interested to see if it gets up to, $300 or $400 per box. First off the line, I think is going to be another key interesting point of data because you can see it first off the line usually going for about double in Prizm what a hobby box goes for. So there's a lot of speculation to be sort of factored in here as are we speculating that the boxes will start high and go low, or are they going to start lower and go higher? Like, are they going to stay relatively the same? And I think there's elements of truth to probably all of those scenarios probably happening at some point. But I think we will start probably around where Prizm is right now. I think it'll creep up a little bit before release and then come back down similar to what we saw with some of the other products. But I think from a singles perspective, like you're going to focus on people who will take that wax price and try and extrapolate that data out to factor in how to spend on the singles. So it's going to be really interesting. Like again, I'm really just here excited to see how this all plays out. But I think for the first time that we've seen a Prizm product in WWE came in and went just like this. Now it's probably going to be a much more flat sort of approach now that people have sort of seen that the hobby is on a downturn, that the economics surrounding trading cards are on a downturn, that the overall economy is on a downturn. Like all of those things factor in, especially now that crypto and all the people that were investing with crypto are really reeling in terms of like how their investments are playing out. There's not as much money in the hobby flowing and things have taken a dip. But Prizm is a niche product in a niche area of the hobby, and I'm curious, how the greater hobby responds to it this time around. I hope there's still a lot of excitement around it. I'm excited myself as a WWE collector to get my people. But yeah, this is going to be a fun one. Now gone through my most exciting elements I think that we're going to see in Prizm 2023. Really excited to hear anything that you guys want to add in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. You can follow me on Instagram at WWE Gellman, on Twitter at SC Uncensored. You can follow my website where I talk a lot about wrestling cards, www.sportscardsuncensored.com. But check back frequently for more videos because I'm going to be covering a lot of this stuff as it pertains to the wrestling card hobby, how wrestling card collectors are engaging with things like a lot of different aspects of the market because it's such a cool experience to be at the forefront of a burgeoning niche part of this hobby. And I think Prizm 2023 is one of those things that will be a key indicator as to how the market will perform over the next year. So be sure to look as things get going, as boxes start selling, as allocations start sort of selling on Blowout and other online retailers, like what's happening with the pricing, what's been going on. as we lead up to some of the previews. Pay attention to that stuff because it drives so much of the hobby around Prizm and some of the things that happen as we lead off the 2023 year. So I'm very excited for this. I'm very excited to continue to make more videos. Really hope that you guys continue to check back, and thanks for watching. See you guys soon.